Hi everyone, so I hope you all are doing really well. So we are going to start with our new chapter today, that is body fluids and circulation from class 11 NCERT. Okay, so now what we are going to do, I'm just going to share my screen with you. Can you see it? I hope it's being shared now. So as I already discussed that the chapter which we are going to do is body fluids and circulation. So in your class 10th, you have already studied about the circulatory system. Now, when we say body fluids, the first thing and the foremost thing which comes up in our mind is blood, right? And I know that this topic is one of the favorite topic of so many students. That's why we are starting from this. So when we say talk about blood, blood is the one which is actually going to responsible for transporting all the nutrients, all the hormones, all the enzymes, and any type of protein in your body. So every kind of transport is possible only because of the blood which you have in your body, right? And the prominently two fluids which we have already are familiar with is your blood and the lymph, right? Blood and lymph. Now, let's just talk about blood in detail. As you can see, if we talk about blood, blood is prominently is a fluid connective tissue, right? Definitely, it is the fluid present in our body, but specifically it is the fluid connective tissue. Now see, you have already studied about the connective tissue. Now these connective tissues are of further three types, right? And when we specifically talk about the connective tissues are in itself have three main components. They have the cells in them, they have the matrix, and they also have the fiber. But the speciality of blood here is that the blood we have in our body is not having the fiber. So I can say that the blood which we are having is actually a fiberless connective tissue. Yes. And the next foremost and the most important thing which we have to know that blood is actually mesodermal in origin. It is mesodermal in origin. You have seen, right? During the development of the embryos, the three major layers which decide that which particular organ is going to develop from which a layer, which germ layer. So we have three layers, the three germ layers we are having, endoderm, mesoderm, and ectoderm. So mesoderm is the one which is going to form the blood. That is your blood fluid connective, right? This is important. Now, when we talk about the blood and its components, basically the major focus of our in today's lesson is the blood and its components. So if we talk about the blood and its component, we will divide it into two major. So since I am saying it as fluid connective tissue, when we say fluid connective tissue, that means there is something so much present in your body which is going to transport so many other things. That means I have to have some liquidity part in the blood. That liquid part in the blood which we are having is actually called as the plasma. What do we call it? Plasma, right? And then we are also aware of this thing that we have the different types of cells in our blood. We have RBCs, we have WBCs. We are aware about this much information from our previous classes. So number one, we actually call them as blood corpuscles, right? Now blood corpuscles, if I ask you, these are nothing but these are the blood cells. Corpuscles is actually the cell, right? The major blood cells which we have are RBCs, which is the another name for RBC is erythrocytes, right? Then we have the WBCs, the white blood cells, which are also known as leukocytes. And then at last you have the platelets. Platelets also known as thrombocytes, right? So if in case you get the question with thrombocytes in the question, don't get confused. We are actually talking about the platelets, right? These are the other name for these cells. Now, when we talk about the plasma, since I'm saying that blood is a fluid connective tissue, so the most of the fluided part which you see in the blood, that is the plasma. So the major part the blood is carrying is plasma. That is 55% of the composition of 100% blood is plasma, and the 45% which is the leftover part out of 100 is your blood corpuscle, right? And there is very interesting fact about the plasma which we see. If you see the plasma properly, in plasma also, since we are saying that it is a fluid part, right? So the 90 to 92% of this plasma is actually your water, right? I'll repeat it. The 90 to 92% of the composition of the plasma you see is actually water. Because we are saying that's fluid part of the blood, right? But what about the leftover part? What about the leftover part? The 6 to 8% leftover part which you see, they are actually different types of proteins present in the plasma, right? So I can say the 90 to 92% of the blood, not the blood, but the plasma is water. So it can be asked as a question, and it has been asked as a question, that what is the percentage of the water present in the plasma? That is 90 to 92%. But if it is asking you the percentage of plasma in the blood, that is going to be 55%. Okay, I hope I am clear till here. So if you have any doubts, you can ask in the chat. Next, we have what are the different types of proteins we can see in the plasma. So let's talk about the different types of proteins. Why do we need proteins? What is the function of proteins? See, eventually in your different, every cell of your body, the latest thing which the cell is going to do is basically the formation of the protein, right? So what is happening? The DNA is getting formed, DNA is getting replicated, DNA is eventually going to make the RNA, and then the protein is going to be made. And it's going to be made into the cytoplasm of your cell, right? This is happening. The proteins in our body play a very important role in performing various functions. So the different types of proteins which we see in the plasma are three different proteins, which is, number one is albumin, then we have the globulins, and then we have the fibrinogen. I'll write it again for you. Right? So we have fibrinogen. Now these all of proteins are going to perform the different functions. Now let's continue and understand the functions of all these three proteins which are produced by the plasma or which are present in the plasma. See, for example, this is your blood vessel, right? This is your blood vessels, and the albumin is present inside this blood vessel, which what it is doing there, it is actually holding the water, right? It actually holding the water. If it doesn't hold the water, what will happen? If it doesn't hold the water in your blood vessel, what will happen? This water is going to release out of your blood vessels, and it will enter into the different cells and the tissues which are present nearby your blood vessel. And eventually, if the water is going to enter a lot in these cells and the tissues, it is going to lead to the swelling or the edema condition will be there, right? This is going to happen. So I can say from here that this albumin is actually controlling or regulating the BCOP, that is blood colloidal osmotic pressure. Yes, it is regulating your blood colloidal osmotic pressure, right? I hope we are clear here. Then we have the globulins. Globulins are three types: alpha globulin, beta globulin, gamma globulin. Here we are going to talk about the gamma globulin in detail. Gamma globulin is actually the immunoglobulins, right? Now the immunoglobulin is the another term which we use for the antibodies or the antibodies, right? For example, you have gone through a bacterial infection. What is going to happen? Your body is going to start preparing some agents against that pathogen which has entered in your body, which is a bacteria or a virus, and the antibiotics or the antibodies are going to be made in respect to the prevention of that particular bacterial infection which has occurred in your body, right? These are antibodies which are, this gamma is nothing but the antibody, right? And it is going to help you in your defense mechanism. So it is basically going to help you in your immunity. It is going to help you, giving you the immunity, right? That's how we can say the defense mechanism. And the questions have been seen from this part specifically, that which type of protein is involved in the defense mechanism of the body. So we will say globulins, and specifically gamma globulin. Okay. Now we have the fibrinogen. We will talk about fibrinogens more in detail when we'll talk about the blood clotting in detail. So blood clotting, it is definitely involved in the blood clotting or the clotting of the blood. Simple, right? So this was all about the plasma, which we were supposed to know and understand. It's all about the plasma. Now, let's move on to the right side and just see all about the erythrocytes. I am going to talk about erythrocyte a little bit in detail. Let's just have a look. Okay. Erythrocytes or the red blood cells. Now, very important term here, we need to understand that the formation of blood, right? The formation of blood is actually the blood cells, we say specifically, it takes place in the bone marrow, right? It takes place in the bone marrow. So bone marrow is involved in the formation of the blood cell. Now, the formation of the blood blood cells in the bone marrow is actually known as, it's known as homopoiesis, right? And if the formation of RBC is there in the bone marrow, then we call it as a erythropoiesis, right? This is really important. And there is one more term comes from here, that erythropoiesis is formed with the help of particular protein or a hormone, we say, which is called as erythropoietin. And this is actually coming from where does it come from? You will tell me, where does it come from, right? So this is the question for you. It's an important question which has been seen in NEET and CBSE board exams. So yes, this is the function of the RBCs. Like RBCs are actually, the formation of RBCs in the bone marrow is known as erythropoiesis with the help of the protein or the hormone we call as erythropoietin, right? Now very one important thing, another point which we need to focus. These RBCs are actually the one which are present in most abundant amount. Yes, these are present in most abundant amount, and the amount which we see usually is 5 to 5.5 million in number, right? So RBCs are present around 5 to 5.5 million in numbers, million per millimeter cube of blood, right? And if you see it in females, it is quite less than males. So this amount is present in the males, but in the females, it is around 4.5 to 5 between that, right? Now see what happens. One more important factor which you need to check is, what is the shape of the RBC? Okay, so let's just see with the help of a diagram. This is quite shape of RBCs. And there is one important factor point about RBC, that RBCs on maturity, and they mature, on their maturity, what do? They leave all their organelles. And along with their organelles, what else do they leave? You already know this. They also leave their nucleus. That's why we say the RBCs are not having nucleus. Why they are not having nucleus? Because they need a space for a pigment, which is a respiratory pigment involved in the transpiration of oxygen and carbon dioxide, that is known as hemoglobin. So that this red thing which you see in between the RBC, this is hemoglobin, right? What it is? It is a respiratory pigment required for the transportation of gases in our body, right? Which we will be covering in the respiratory system. Now, this is all done. Now, there are two conditions which happens if the number of RBCs increased a lot or if the number of RBCs decreases, right? With respect to their expected number. So that what are the disorders associated with RBCs? Let's just have a look on that. We talk about the disorders associated with RBC. We see two cases can be there. They can be in the excess or they can be in the low amount. They are very less in number. If they are very less in number, or we can say they are showing the deficiency. So in females, you usually know that if there is a deficiency of blood in the body, it is going to lead to the anemia, right? That is anemia. And the name of the disorder where the number of the RBCs is very less or deficient, we call it as erythrocytopenia. Penia is actually means less, and when it is excess in number, that condition is known as polycythemia. It's polycythemia, right? These two names you should understand and you should know their meaning. What do they mean? So if there is the deficiency, we use the term penia, and if there is the excess of RBCs present in the human body, that is polycythemia. But now tell me one thing, if the number of RBC is more, what is the harm in that? Why are we saying that it is a disorder? Why have we put it in disorder field? Because if the RBCs are going to increase a lot in number as their expected value, what will happen? It is going to increase the viscosity of the blood. And if the viscosity of the blood is going to increase, what will happen? The fluid part of the blood is going to be very hard, or we can say it is going to be having very viscous in nature. Because of that viscosity, your heart is not going to able to transport the blood in a very proper manner. And if it is not going to transport the blood in a proper manner, what is going to happen? Severe heart conditions can happen. That's why we say that it is a disorder. So the number of the RBCs, even the number of anything in your body should be in an optimum range. The pH should be in an optimum range. The temperature should be in an optimum range. Not much, too much, and not too less. So we have to maintain the balance in everything. Like you have to maintain the balance in your study and the fun activities you do. Okay. So I hope whatever we have done till here, it is totally clear to you. And then we are going to cover about the details about WBCs and the platelets. So what all we have done, just we have a look. We just initiated the topic. What is body fluid in circulation? Where we talked about the blood and we talked about some important points about blood. Then we talked about the components of blood, that is plasma and the blood corpuscles. We talked about plasma in detail, and then we move on to the blood corpuscles where we talked about RBCs. And the next part, that is WBCs and platelets, we are going to cover in the upcoming session. Thank you and have a nice day.